What's going on, everybody? Thank you guys so much for watching the show. Wanted to talk to you about our friends over at Prize Picks, the best place to win cash while watching sports. This app is really easy to use. You just pick more or less on a few player stats, and you could win up to 1,000 times your cash on a single lineup. Best of all, Prize Picks will give you $50 when you play your first $5 lineup. Win or lose, you'll get $50 for playing. Use the promo code PFF and download the app now. Kind of tough to start with the 49ers, one of my least favorite drafts that we had here. But let's list off the names and see if the good people agree. I'm also curious to hear what you would have given them for a grade. First round, they took edge rusher Mykel Williams from the University of Georgia. Second rounder, Alfred Collins, the defensive tackle from Texas. Third rounder, a pair of guys that they're really taking big-time bets on. Nick Martin, the linebacker from Oklahoma State, and then Upton Stout, the versatile defensive back from Western Kentucky. Fourth round, a pair of fourth-round picks here, C.J. West and then wide receiver Jordan Watkins. Fifth round, another two guys, Jordan James and Marcus Siegel. And in the seventh round, three selections, Curtis Rourke, Connor Colby, and Junior Bergen. Our staff at PFF gave this a D. This is the lowest grade that we had for any team. And a big reason why is because a lot of the players that they drafted, major outliers from where we had them on our big board, how they are built as football players when it comes to the outliers of them physically, height, weight, and length, and then also just failing to address the offensive line at all whatsoever. Now, they addressed defense, which they needed to do, but curious, what did you think of this draft that we gave them a D? My grade is very similar. It's D, D minus is something like that. I did not like the 49ers draft. What did you think of their draft overall?
Yeah, I agree. It's not great. I think the one thing, if you look at it in the context of they were just so hell-bent on making their run defense better, and that's the only goal, then you give this a higher grade and go, well, the run defense probably got a lot better with Williams, with Collins, maybe with Martin, Stout, West, right? So, okay, they might have accomplished one thing in this draft, but it's hard to go into a draft and say we're just going to accomplish one thing when we need depth at corner. And I know they got Upton Stout, but he's probably a slot player, and they have to figure out where he fits in, right? To me, I know they got the guard Connor Colby might be a nice scheme fit in the seventh round, who they could develop behind the scenes, but they didn't get any better on the offensive line in the immediate, and I think that's going to be a problem, especially when you're about to pay your quarterback $50 million a year. And I just think, even at linebacker, and you look at these two third-round picks, I think especially that's kind of where my eyes go here. Look, I'm not as high on Mykel Williams. They're taking a chance on the talent. Sal really likes him. I actually do like Alfred Collins and C.J. West a lot. They're two of my favorite players in the draft, so I think that could help them down the line. But I look at these two third-round picks. Nick Martin was a guy, personally, I'm not sure I would have drafted. And Upton Stout, to me, was probably a 6th or 7th round guy. I think a good player, but you have to really be concerned a little bit, to me, with some of the values in the mid-rounds. Even Jordan Watkins in the 4th, not my favorite receiver in the draft. He had a couple of big-time games, especially this year against Arkansas for Ole Miss, but otherwise there were stretches where he would go very quiet for them, and that's in an Ole Miss offense that's usually very explosive. We saw the numbers, Jackson Dart, Trey Harris, things like that. So, I'm with you. I'm not a huge fan of this draft. I think they accomplished one thing. They made the run defense a lot better, but I think even getting Mykel Williams in there, unless we see a big jump in his development as a pass rusher, right, you really didn't help Nick Bosa in the pass rush here at all either. And for as much as you loaded up this defensive line, when you get in obvious passing situations, and Robert Saleh, we know, doesn't blitz at all, so that's not going to be a thing. It's just going to be Nick Bosa by himself again getting all the double teams, unless Mykel Williams can make a big jump from the 11% pass rush win rate he had last year. So the run defense got better. I don't really think they accomplished much of anything else.
Yeah, I agree with you. And this is sort of how I would break it down here. Mykel Williams was ranked 38th on my board. I know a lot of people were like, oh, yeah, he's a top 10 prospect. I didn't see him that way because I think he's going to be an excellent run defender for you. I think he's strong as an ox. You could play him in a 4-eye. You could play him in a 7 technique. You could play him in all of that. But his pass rush win percentage never really got better throughout his college career. It's hard for me to think, oh, yeah, that'll get better at the NFL. It just very, very rarely happens like that. So I think he's really just a run defense ad that they brought there on the defensive line, which isn't useless. I want to, again, make sure that I say that. Like, it's not like it has no value, but the reason why you draft edge rushers in the top 15, the top 12 at number 11 overall is for pass rush help. You can find good run defenders at the edge rush spot in round 2 and round 3. You could find those things. You really got to draft the good pass rushers at the top. So I thought that was an overdraft there. Alfred Collins is totally fine. Nick Martin, I thought was a borderline draftable prospect. I felt like he could have been a 7th round pick. And if the Niners thought much higher of him, that's also not terrible. Like, I'm not necessarily killing them for that. Like, some scouting staffs and some teams just bet on players more than others. But even if that's the case, even if you liked Upton Stout and Nick Martin enough to draft them and prioritize them as mid-round picks, like, you didn't have to take them in the 3rd. Unless I am totally wrong and some other team would have taken them in the 3rd, I have a hard time believing that you wouldn't be able to get both of those players in the 5th round, and you took them in the 3rd. And that's also an issue for me, because where the game of the NFL draft is obviously about just acquiring good players, it's also about operating the draft in a certain way to where you have the best haul and the best collection of talent possible. And that goes into the intel that you have with other teams and thinking about where other teams are ranking these players. So again, maybe Nick Martin was just thought of way highly around the NFL than I thought that he was. But I didn't really get that feeling. He was right around the 5th round pick when it came to the consensus boards. I was a little bit lower on him than that, because I think for as athletic as he is below the 10th, if not the 5th percentile in height, weight, and length for the linebacker position. He's a super aggressive, super fast linebacker, but that also has some pros and cons, because he can be very over aggressive to the ball and he can have some bad plays as much as some good plays. Upton Stout is somebody who I really like as a football player. I think he's feisty. He, again, measurables. He is below the 10th percentile in height, weight, and length for the cornerback position, even if you move him into the nickel. So, again, you're drafting a player like that in the 3rd. I think you could have got him. I mean, you had 2 4th-round picks and 2 5th-round picks. So it's like that goes into it as well. I think CJ West was a great pick. Jordan Watkins, I thought, was barely draftable as well. Jordan James, I like as a football player, but at that point in time, when you drafted Jordan James in the 5th round, you had no offensive lineman at that point. Could draft another offensive lineman. You're Kyle Shanahan. You could turn any running back in the world into a good player. You don't got to draft one in the 5th round when you haven't touched offensive line before. So I just did not love this draft. And then Marcus Siegel is somebody who played a lot in the slot as well. He played safety, but he played slot. So you kind of drafted 2 of those players in Upton Stout. You just drafted one of those players who's a major measurable outlier in the 3rd round. And then you draft sort of another nickel defender later in the draft, albeit a good athlete. So it's not like I can't see the idea for a lot of these players. I just didn't love where they were drafted, how they prioritized it, and the bets they were making as high as they did for a lot of the outliers that they are trying to take bets on. So this was not one of my favorite classes. I wish they would have hit offensive line a lot heavier. They definitely needed to get better in run defense. They absolutely did that with Mykel Williams, with Nick Martin, with Alfred Collins, and with CJ West. But I would have told you they got better in run defense even if it was just Alfred Collins and CJ West. I don't think you necessarily needed it from a lot of these other players that I felt like you overdrafted over other positions, or other guys that aren't just as big of outliers at that position. So that's why I agree. This is the lowest grade that I gave. I ended up giving them a D-.
I think the 2 things we're going to talk about a lot during the season with the 49ers that are going to be big determinants of them winning and losing ball games is pass protection and pass rush. I think those are the 2 areas I look at right now. And look, you mentioned it, they got better in the trenches. The run D got better, but I still think, and this has been a problem really the entire time that Kyle Shanahan's been there, especially the last couple of years, is drop back pass protection. When they're not front running, when they're not getting play action, when they're not getting in that whole Shanahan sequence of play calls they get into, when they have to drop back and throw the football when everybody in the stadium knows they're doing it, can they drop back and pass protect? And Trent Williams ain't getting any younger, and I got 3 spots on the offensive line where I really question that. So that's going to be that. I think that's going to be an issue come this season again, is pass protection in the drop back game, and can they throw when they really, really need to?